All right, everyone, we are here with a very special guest. We are joined by the lovely Holly Madison. Welcome to the show, Holly.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in.
We're so excited to have you in studio. We have
Thanks.
followed along through your journey, and we love that we are now getting true crime content from you, which is different but really interesting and fun, and would love to talk to you about how that even started. Like, have you always been a true crime fan and then this came to be, or what's the deal?
I have always been a true crime fan ever since I was a little kid, watching Unsolved Mysteries. That was like my favorite thing when it would come on. I thought it was so scary. But it came about like 2 years ago. The first true crime show I did was called The Playboy Murders, and my agent brought me that. And at first I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to do another like Playboy thing.
Yeah.
But he's like, okay, we'll just look at the deck and see if you want to do it. And they sent a deck over of all the cases they wanted to cover. And so many of them I hadn't even heard of. And they were so intriguing. And I was like, but this is a show I would actually watch, though. So I became super excited to do it. We did 2 seasons. And then my new show coming out on Monday, the 25th, is called Lethally Blonde. And it's similar to the Playboy Murders. It's not Playboy specific, but they're murder cases that involve in some way, whether it's the victim or the perpetrator, somebody who's involved in a really intriguing lifestyle, like somebody who's maybe an OnlyFans model, or maybe they were in the adult industry or something like that. So they're really, really interesting cases.
Now, diving into all of these cases, how do you basically separate yourself from them, right? Because it could be really heavy. And, you know, I saw you talk about like at night, like you can even have nightmares about this. Like, how are you diving deep, but also separating yourself at the same time?
Yeah, that can be tricky sometimes, especially if the stories really resonate with me for some reason. But I always try and focus on telling the victim's story as best I can and really looking into who they are. And if the victim in the story is one of the people who is more in the sex work industry, or maybe was a Playboy model or something, I always want to think about how can I portray them as more of a well-rounded person rather than just that one flashy thing that grabs the headline. And I feel really good about doing that, or making my best effort to do that. So that's really what keeps me focused, I think, on the storytelling.
Right.
What how did you guys go about picking, because I think it's 6, right? 6 cases for Lethally Blonde. So how do you go about kind of choosing whose story you're going to tell?
Well, when it was the Playboy Murders, I knew about some of the stories, so I was able to collaborate with them and choose. For this first season of Lethally Blonde, it was more the network and the production that decided on the cases, but I loved what they picked out. I think they're all fascinating. They're all super different.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that some of the cases are still not solved.
Yes.
As you're talking about the cases, do you find yourself trying to figure out, like, how did this happen? Like, trying to, you know, resolve it yourself?
I do. I think everybody loves to speculate in true crime, but some of them you just don't even know based on the story. And, you know, it would be, I think, any true crime producer's dream that having the story out there would bring, you know, somebody coming forward or some new information or something like that.
Right. Yes. Because then it's just like it's just such an endless cycle, you know, when you, the true crime, and then you have the at-home investigators and people who are watching, who get involved. And then sometimes it really does make an actual difference, which is crazy because you would think that the investigative teams would be able to figure it out. But the people at home, sometimes their brain works a different way. But it is really, really interesting. And I just feel like, so were you able to, I know because each case is different, right? And a lot of them end tragically where the person is not with us anymore. But are there ones where you have been able to meet any of the people, actual people involved on any of the shows you've done?
Well, sometimes we have people, I mean, most of the episodes we have people who were close to the people commenting and things like that. But I haven't met any of the, you know, perpetrators or obviously victims.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, you know, wanting to separate yourself from the Playboy, you know, title and all of that. And when they came to you for the Playboy Murders, were you already looking to do a true crime series and then that came to be? Or did the Playboy Murders come first?
The Playboy Murders came first. Like, I love the true crime genre, but it was never anything I had tried to do. It was just kind of like a happy accident. But I want to go back to that last question you had, because when you said, did you meet any of these people? I was thinking after the fact, when I was working on the show. There were a couple cases in the Playboy Murders season 2 that involved people I had met. One of them was a woman I met maybe 20 years ago, and I was looking when I was doing my podcast, because I do a podcast about the Girls Next Door show I was on. We review everything. And before we started the podcast, like a year and a half ago, Bridget and I were going back and we were looking at, different things people had written who had been in that Playboy world the same time we had. And one of the women who wrote a book, somebody I met briefly 20 years ago, I was just like, whatever happened to her? And then I found out she was horribly murdered in a double murder and a suicide by her ex-husband. So that was really jarring to learn about. And I wanted to, learn more about it and learn what happened to her.
Because that's an example of it really hitting your actual life. You're like, now I Playboy murders, but I've met this person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's scary. That's sometimes it just like sends shivers down your spine. It's like, that can be a lot. And yeah, it's the journey has been so interesting to watch. You have your podcast. You also are a New York Times bestseller. You've told this story about, your journey, because people probably, do you feel like people still see you and just connect you to that earlier time in your life? They're just like, oh, Girls Next Door. That you must be the same exact person.
Sometimes, but I feel like I talk so much about like the behind the scenes. I feel like a lot of people kind of understand that things weren't exactly how they were portrayed on TV and stuff.
When was the first realization for you after being in that world that you wanted to share your actual truth of what was going on?
That happened maybe about 4 years after I left the mansion. I would just, be out living my life, which was at that point completely different. Like I had a husband, I was pregnant, I'd had like a whole career of my own after the mansion, but people would still come up to me every single day, like asking, how's Hef? How's this other girl you don't talk to who talks shit about you every day in the meeting, things like that. And I would always say nice things just because I felt like that's the nice thing to do. And like, I don't want to get into it with people. And if people were fans of the show, I don't want to like burst their bubble or whatever. But when those people aren't speaking favorably about me and they say snarky little things all the time, I start to feel like a punk for like just saying the nice thing. And it just like weighs on you after a while. And you just feel like, especially, with me, I was in a really toxic relationship that I wouldn't recommend to other people. And it just starts to really be a pit in your stomach after a while. And you just don't want to lie about it anymore. You feel like you're living a lie, just greeting the people in your day-to-day life that come up to you that you don't know and want to ask, how is it? So I was like, I just have to write a book and get it all out. And I'm glad I did, because now people don't really come up to me and ask me the questions the same way they used to.
Instead of just pleasing a dream scenario in everybody else's eyes, people what they would call like iconic and all of that. And especially I think, during lockdown and with streaming, the Girls Next Door, everyone was binge watching that. Did that also bring back memories for you? People are like tweeting clips out and they're resurfacing. How do you deal with seeing that?
It's not too jarring unless people are like reposting nudity from the show. And I'm like, why? Because when we were recorded for the show, we thought, it's going to be on E, everything's going to be blurred, whatever. So I would have been a lot more careful had I realized they were going to put the fully nude stuff on the DVDs and like blast it in other countries and things like that. So it is what it is. But now that me and other people from the show have been very vocal about how we feel about that, it's still kind of an eye roll when I see people like reposting the full nudity. I'm like, okay, whatever. But you got to deal with it.
And you get to do the podcast, right? So you do Girls Next Level and you can kind of unpack those things. Has the podcast been kind of therapeutic for you guys in doing that together?
100%. It's so much fun to be able to work with your best friend. And, sometimes we get triggered every now and again and we're surprised when it happens. You never really know what's going to come up. But for the most part, we talk about a lot of really fun times we had. We have a lot of guests on from that era. And it's a really great excuse for us to like reconnect with people we haven't talked to in like 15, 20 years or haven't seen in person for that long. So we're having so much fun with it too. It definitely feels like a therapy session in front of, so many people, but it's a lot of fun too.
It's a good way to unpack kind of everything that went on in Rewatch. Do you go week by week rewatching, or have you rewatched like a season all at once? Do you binge it all together?
We go week by week. Okay. And it usually takes us 2 weeks just to get through one episode of Girls Next Door because there's so much shit to talk about.
So it's like you really have to pace yourself.
100%. Yeah. It's better for our mental health that way too. If we can like take it slow and talk about every little thing and just every little, funny thing or things that might be relevant now that come up with it rather than trying to speed through.
Right. Are there like some episodes where you have to like pause it 15 times to just even get through? the whole thing?
Usually, yeah, because I'm writing down like a million notes, just everything that goes through my head.
Right.
So for sure.
Are there times when you're watching and you are like, wow, I don't recall that whatsoever, and it just like brings it all back?
Every once in a while, I have a pretty sharp memory, but every once in a while you will see something where I'm like, what is that? And that's so great to have Bridget there too, because we can confer, we can ask people we knew. There was an episode we recorded just recently where we were talking about an episode where it was one of the girls' 21st birthdays. And I didn't stay in Vegas the whole time they were there, but a whole big group of playmates was there all night. And Bridget's asking everybody, what do you remember? Because I'm having the weirdest amnesia. I mean, obviously everybody's partying, you have amnesia, but usually you remember something.
Yeah, of course.
Nobody remembers anything. There was one girl I contacted who was like, oh yeah, I actually got a tattoo. Like she had a few like tidbits, but there's people who are watching it back who are like, I see myself, but like I don't remember that.
Right. You're like, I can tell I was physically there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not mentally, it's not coming back at all. No, it's crazy. But there was 4 seasons?
There were 5 seasons
seasons.
that me, Bridget, and Kendra were on, and then there was a 6th season with a new cast of girls.
Okay.
So there were 5 seasons, and you were in the mansion for 10 years, right?
7 years,
Okay.
yeah.
So did you feel like when cameras were coming in, was that sort of a relief in a way that you can be like, okay, we're documenting some of the things that are happening because there were things that you wanted to get out there?
In the beginning, I was terrified because I was in a relationship that I felt bad about. I felt a lot of shame about it. Like I knew people knew I was in that relationship, obviously, but I didn't want to blast it on a reality show. But it was like, you have to do it or you know, you're out on the street tomorrow. So we did it. I was super, super nervous, but then we learned to embrace it and have fun with it, use it for our own opportunities, because he would let us do things that he wouldn't ordinarily let us do if it was like for the show. So that led to like other little business opportunities and things I got to do. So we really learned to work with it, and it really made things so much better around there.
And just like reality shows now, though, I feel like we see a lot of reality stars. We talk to a lot of reality stars where they're like, oh, they didn't show this and they didn't show that. There's more to the conversation. Do you feel that too while watching it back?
100%. I can't even watch reality TV anymore because I know nothing is real. Like people will rave about, you know, those dating shows on Netflix or whatever they are. And they're like, are you watching it? I'm like, I can't watch any of that. Like I can tell when something's taken out of context. But the creepy thing is, like, they used to cut our voices together and they call it Frankenbiting to like create something you said that you never actually said. But it's so creepy now because they can make it look like your face is saying it. Like people always talk about, oh, the deep fakes are coming.
Right.
The deep fakes are there.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And how do they get around that?
I have no idea. Usually back in my day when they were trying to make you say something you weren't saying, they wouldn't show your face saying it necessarily. They could ask you to say something that's not real, and maybe you would, but they would have to cut away from your face, and you would hear it like it would sound like I'm talking like this. Kind of like once you can't unhear it after that. But now, and I heard Christine Quinn from Selling Sunset talking about this too, how now you can look at somebody and it looks like they're saying it. That happened to me on a documentary I was a part of recently. I saw a clip from it and I was like, I had to pull over. Oh, I wasn't driving when I was watching it, but I remember I was going somewhere and I had to sit in my car for a while. And I was like, not only do I know I didn't say that, but I would never have said that.
Yeah.
And it was something that was just a tiny detail that maybe wasn't important to anybody else, but to me it mattered. But I'm watching the video and it looks like I'm fucking saying it.
Right. And especially, it doesn't matter what you're saying when if you didn't say something, you are going to want to say, I did not say that. It's extremely freaky to see yourself and it kind of like alters your reality.
Totally.
But legally, they're allowed to do that? Is that like a legal thing where like if you sign on to be on a reality show, it's kind of just like
all those shows
they can do whatever they want? Like,
yeah, I assume so.
Yeah, like,
it's
right?
insane.
I mean, they do it on The Bachelor all the time.
Yeah, that one's easier to catch now.
Like the Frankenbites we can kind of pick up on because more people are aware of it. I feel like when shows like, you know, Girls Next Door were on, the viewer was not as aware of those tactics.
Yeah.
And now you can like kind of listen for it. And when you do listen for it, you can a lot of the times tell. But when we were watching those types of reality shows, we really felt like this is all real. This is all right. Like nobody was really talking about the secrets of reality TV back then, especially those heydays of E! With Kardashians and Girls Next Door, like everything. Like we were like, this all has to be the truth.
And also, I think, you know, for us, we watch a lot of reality TV. We talk about it on our podcast. So I think we are easier to suspect things.
Yeah.
But the everyday viewer of a reality show now still believes everything that they are seeing to its core. Like,
Yeah,
they're
people wanna
like,
be
I can't believe
entertained.
they said that.
Yeah.
And like, they won't even, propose the question of, but what if they actually did it?
Totally. Yeah.
What has the response been like of the fans of the podcast when they hear, an episode? Do you hear from fans that are like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys thought that about this scene? We would have had no idea.
100%. We get so much feedback.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that agree with what we say. There's a lot of people that don't agree with what we say. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, we never thought that as a viewer. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm watching it and I know what the producers were trying to do. So it's all over the place, but it's satisfying for me to at least like get my side of the story out there.
Yeah,
Totally.
definitely.
Now, when it comes to Hugh Hefner and when he passed, I remember when he passed, it was like all the pictures blasted everywhere,
Yeah.
icon, everything, right? Did that kind of spark a nerve with you a little bit to be like, this person is seen as such an icon, but also there's all this dark history that, is coming to light?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie and say it never annoyed me when certain people would tweet things. But for the most part, it didn't, just because I wasn't, like, I know a lot of people don't believe this because it's kind of inextricable, like cause and effect thing. But when I came out with my story, it wasn't to ruin him. It was just so everybody knew where I had been coming from in the relationship, why I left, what my life was like after. And if you want to change your opinion on him after that, that's somebody's prerogative and priority. And I know there's a lot of people who had a good relationship with him or a good working relationship with him, and that's fine too. Like, I don't begrudge anybody that. But I mean, there might have been like a tweet or two that I was like, oh, really?
Yeah, totally.
What has your connection been like with the other girls? Because I know obviously, you do the show with Bridget, you guys are super, super close, but there were other women in the cast, and have there been ups and downs? Like, what has communication been like for all of you as a group?
Kendra, I don't talk to. We had a falling out when we were both doing our spinoffs because we were contractually obligated if we had spinoffs with E. The same producer who was best friends with Hef, who did Girls Next Door, had to do our spinoffs as well. So I'm out living my life somewhere else, but we're still kind of being puppet mastered by this guy. And he really tried to like play us off each other and make us jealous of each other. So like, if we're jealous of each other, he thought we're going to do what he wants. And I think I saw that and she didn't see that, and it turned into a big blow up fight. So we have not spoken in years and years and years. But we have so many friends from those days, like all the playmates who are around, and it's been so much fun just reconnecting with all those people.
When it comes to Kendra and not speaking, you haven't spoken in years, you guys had a falling out. Is there ever a part of you that goes, I wish we could talk this out? Or is it kind of like, you know what, that's in the past, and sometimes you don't need to like rehash things or be friends with somebody just for the sake of it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm watching the show and I see like the fun times and the good times. And I'm like, you know what? It would just be good to be good. Like, we don't have to like hang out every day, but it would be good to like be on good terms. Like, we can touch base if we need to. I don't know that that'll ever happen because I don't know, if she's really processed all the things she went through in her work life. I'm not necessarily talking about Playboy. I'm talking about that producer we worked with. And like, I don't know what her perspective is on that, or how much she sees or understands now what was going on, but I'm kind of either or on it.
If it came your way, you wouldn't be like, no way.
No.
And I mean, you've been super open about your story, your health, your being in, and I know like towards the end of last year you revealed a diagnosis that you were on the autism spectrum. What has the response been like to doing that? And also, how do you feel as, an adult? Because a lot of times a diagnosis like that you get as a kid, and when it comes later in life, it can be very confusing. How did getting that diagnosis make you feel?
For me personally, it was a huge relief. I always knew that there was something a little bit different about me, and I made so many excuses for it. I was like, oh, okay, well, I grew up in Alaska out in the middle of nowhere. That must be, but my sister did too, and she's fine. She's perfectly normal. So I would make all these excuses. I wouldn't really, realize why I operated the way I did. But when my mom told me that she had always kind of suspected this since I was really young, I looked at the symptoms. I thought that sounds like me. And eventually it was last summer I got a diagnosis, and it's just been such a relief for me to know more about myself and why I operate the way I do and be able to tell other people so they understand. And because people will be so put off by like the tiniest social cue that like I'm not getting, and they'll think I'm the biggest asshole. Like it's not
right. They
you,
think you're being rude. Or
Yeah,
like
totally.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm just able to operate so much better now that I know. It's a relief. I mean, they call it I also want to acknowledge that they call it a spectrum for a reason. Like I can function pretty quote unquote normally. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot more challenges than I do, but for me it was just a big relief to find out.
Right. What was the diagnosis like testing wise?
Oh, it was interesting. We did it all remotely over Zoom. I vlogged it, but I never edited the vlog, and I kept losing track of how many appointments. Like I'd check in, I'd be like, okay, today's appointment number 7.
Right.
Like I think it was 7 or 8 appointments. It was all kinds of different tests. She'd show me pictures, everything from questions or how would you rate how you do certain things, or she'll show you a picture of just like somebody's eyes and ask you what expression is this thing, all kinds of different things. But it also was, she took an appointment with my mom, she took an appointment with my ex-husband, because they want to hear from other people like how I acted on my life and what I would do and things like that. So it's very intense. It's pretty expensive. Unfortunately, it's not super easily accessible to everybody. I mean, for me, it took me a long time to even find somebody. Like I was interested in getting a diagnosis for about 2 years until I found somebody. And eventually I found this great doctor. I found her through Google, and I don't know why she never came up on my searches before. I don't know if it's one of those like it was just meant to be when it was type of thing.
That's extremely interesting.
The timing just matched up then.
Yeah.
Right. And did you have a lot of women reach out to you after you talked about it, being like, this also, happened to me later in life?
Absolutely. Especially on TikTok, there's so many people who are on the spectrum and they post, and I love seeing their perspectives and hearing from those people.
Were you kind of like wishing that you had known a lot sooner when, maybe when you were younger?
I don't know, because when I was a kid, being different in any way was so stigmatized.
Yep.
I don't know. It might have affected me completely different. I kind of like, even though through all like the fumbles in my life, like I love where I am, and like the journey is what it is. So I wouldn't really change anything.
It's extremely interesting.
It definitely is. I know your second book, you wrote a lot about life in Vegas and spending time out there. I'm kind of fascinated by like the Vegas life.
Yeah.
How long did you live there?
I still live there.
Still live there.
Yeah, I spent time in LA too, but I still live there. I've actually I figured this out the other day. I've actually lived in Vegas longer than I've lived anywhere in my life. So and I just love it so much there. It's so special. I feel like it has everything you could want from a big city. I mean, New Yorkers might not agree. I respect that. Yeah. But like, I feel like it has everything you would want from a big city, but it's also very much like a small town at the same time. And it's so chill. And I just love it so much.
That's so interesting because, you're so close to LA, right? And some might say like, why wouldn't you just live in LA? But if you like that smaller feel, then I guess Vegas is the better option. Yeah,
LA is interesting. LA, unless you already have contacts and know people there, it can be such a lonely place. Like Bridget and I talk about that on our podcast too. And one of the reasons we felt so drawn to the mansion was it felt like such a community. Because when you move to LA by yourself, it's like nobody knows their neighbors. And, it can be a very lonely, isolating place. And not everybody in LA is like this. I know people get annoyed when people say this, but there are so many people who only want to hang out with you if you can do something for them. And it's just like, it's an interesting place. There's a lot of things to love about LA, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
What kind of community have you created for yourself, like in Vegas?
I just love my group of friends. Yeah. I mean, I met them when I first moved there, like in late 2008, and it's pretty much been the same crew of people that whole time. And I just love them.
What's the dating life like out there? Do you still date, or is it just,
I've had the same boyfriend for the past 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like dating anywhere is interesting. In Vegas, it's interesting because there's a lot of guys in the nightlife industry and they just do not want to grow up. So that's fine if that's what you're looking for. But I didn't do bad there. You know, I met my ex-husband.
Yes.
We had kids, and I've had the same boyfriend for the last 5 years, and he's from Vegas as well. So it's not awful.
Right. So that's great. That's what I'm saying. Then you have created that community of people that obviously, once you create that community, no matter where you are, you're good. I feel like you got to have that support system and the people there, and then you can make the most of whatever city you're in, really.
I love how you said, like, yeah, I've had my boyfriend for the past 5 years. It's not awful.
Oh, no, I didn't mean he was not awful.
No,
I just meant like dating in Vegas.
It's not awful.
Just like it worked.
It's going.
No, it's okay. Hey, it worked.
Yeah, it worked out.
Is what you were saying.
Yeah,
really,
I mean, I met more than one good person in Vegas,
Right.
so it's not,
of course.
dating there isn't terrible.
Do you have any, well, you love Vegas, but are you ever like, I'm going to go back to Alaska one day?
No, although I did go on a Disney cruise to Alaska recently, and it was so nice. Like, I love visiting, but I'm just like Vegas till I die now.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you explain to two people who have never been to Alaska what it's like? Because I envision Alaska like an iceberg.
Yeah.
That's what I envision when I think Alaska.
Well, there are icebergs there for sure. I'm from Prince of Wales Island, which is in southeast Alaska. It's very remote. Like if you watch any of those Alaska survival off the grid shows, they film a lot of that on Prince of Wales Island. So it's very remote, but the nature there is just beautiful. If you're outdoorsy, if you love like hunting and fishing or anything like that, like that's your place, 100%.
Is it as cold as I think it is? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So like I'm like, am I like, you know, there's stereotypes.
Yeah, and there's the thing where like certain times of year it's only dark for like 4 hours a night.
You
that's
got really
crazy.
interesting daylight. You got a lot of daytime, right?
Yeah, in the spring and summer, and opposite in the winter.
Right. That makes. I know that is a place. I know you mentioned a cruise, and I feel like anytime I do hear about people going on vacations and going out to Alaska, the cruises are like so popular and people love those. And I guess you leave like from Vancouver and go, yep. I would love to do that.
Yeah, maybe one day.
I know.
Yeah, it was so relaxing. It was like just what I needed at that time in my life.
Yes. And you said a Disney cruise?
Yeah.
You're a big Disney girl, yes?
I'm the worst Disney adult anybody's ever met. Like, I invented the cringe. For sure.
I know. I was laughing because I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure you did have a Disneyland wedding.
Yeah, we got married inside Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep.
Do you have a Disney tattoo?
No, but
so that's when you've like really reached full.
Here's the thing though, my tattoo is like, I don't know if I can pull this sleeve up, but it's like a sacred geometry. It's like a flower of life, but everybody thinks it's the Epcot
Oh my God, it does look like Epcot
because I'm a Disney adult.
How many times a year do you go to Disneyland, would you say?
Oh my God. I go quite a bit during the holidays. And like, I like to take my kids.
Love it, the holidays.
My ex-husband also likes to take my kids, so they get to go a lot. I'd say I go.
Your kids are living the dream.
Yeah.
Your kids are like, oh, we buy double Disney.
You're raising Disney adults.
Yeah, totally. Probably on average, like once a month.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. You're clocking in a lot of trips.
Totally.
But when you are, you own it though. It's like, yes, I am the Disney adult that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
What's your favorite like Disney attraction?
The Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
Are you riding it every time you go, once a month?
Not always, because, I have another friend who's another Disney adult. We've been friends forever.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just go to, like, shop and eat. Like, we're both members of the club there, and sometimes we just go hide in the club and eat. And
favorite Disney princess?
I love Sleeping Beauty, but I love Elsa, too.
Those are good ones. And what about, do your kids have favorite ones? Or does it change all the time?
It changes. My daughter's not, like, they both like Disney. My daughter's not super into Disney. She more likes like Pixar stuff.
Yeah.
My son was solid pirate man for like 3 years, and I love that phase. He's out of it now. He's into Top Gun now.
Yeah.
But I love the pirate phase. I miss my little pirate.
Oh, so then you can also mix in some trips to Universal.
I was just going to say, do you venture to Universal at all, or is it strictly Disney?
Sometimes I used to like going to the Universal Studios in Florida. Like I would usually go to Disney World once a year. But I kind of had my fill of it for now. And the Universal in California is like not, and it's okay.
Yeah, I've only been to the one in Florida.
Yeah. Disney. So if you take the trips to Disney World, I mean, obviously Disneyland's so much closer to you.
Yeah.
But do you think Disney World is better than Disneyland?
Well, Disney World is so much bigger that everybody's going to say that's better. But like I grew up with Disneyland. Like that's where all my memories are.
Yeah.
So
you're making me want to go to Disneyland next week.
No, I know, like so bad. I'm like, damn, I haven't been to
should we make a trip to Disneyland?
Seriously. I've actually never been to Disneyland.
Me either, not the one in
the one in, I mean, Disneyland, Disney World I've been to.
Right.
But we're East Coast girls. So
for sure.
when we were younger and the trips would be, oh my God, we're going to Orlando.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
So maybe we'll have to.
Never say never.
Hey, we got some time when we're in LA next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll need some recommendations.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're so excited to watch more. I mean, the true crime stuff I think is fascinating, especially because you're kind of talking about a world of true crime that I feel like isn't as discussed as much. Because there's a lot of, and we don't have to dive into it too deep again, but there's a lot of, I find, victim blaming in in that world. It's like, well, you know, look what she did, or look what they,
absolutely.
and it's so interesting because it's just not the case. So I love that you're telling these people's stories. I think it's really important.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So everyone can watch Lethally Blonde. It's coming out Monday, March 25th, 10 o'clock ID. You can stream them as well.
Yeah, I think the next day it goes up on Max.
Okay,
I think it's also on Hulu too.
Awesome. So
very, very
lot
cool.
of options.
Yes.
There. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in.
No problem.
Thank you, Holly.
Thanks for having me, guys.